2 minutes after 3, so out of respect for people's time, I think we'll get started and let people trickle in. My name is Scott Choquette. I work with Dewberry, and we've been hired by the county to help with the update to the 2023 update to the Prince George's County Hazard Mitigation Plan. Joined by Jade Payne, who's the Deputy Project Manager and Principal Planner on the project. In a minute, we're going to see if Joey or Hassan want to have a chance to welcome the group, but I thought maybe before we do that, we could go around and do introductions, or maybe Hassan or Joey would like to do the intro first, and then we can follow with the introductions.
I turn over to Joey.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to assist us with our hazard mitigation plan updates. And as Scott stated, let's go around the horn to see who's actually on the call, and then we can get started.
Okay, maybe the easiest way is if I go down the participant list and just ask people. There was somebody on the phone with a Maryland 301 area code. Would you like to introduce yourself first?
Yes. Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Toy Lattimore, and I was asked to join this committee, and I look forward to working with everyone.
Thank you. 240 area code on the phone.
Pete Peterson, Manager of Emergency Preparedness for PEPCO.
Welcome. Hassan.
Hi, my name is Hassan Badr. I'm the lead planner for the county hazard mitigation plan update.
Michael Block.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I am an emergency management planner with WSSC Water.
Welcome. Patrick Callahan.
Good afternoon. I'm Patrick Callahan. I'm the GIS manager for the Prince George's Office of Information Technology.
Welcome. And I'm sorry if I messed this one up, but Quebec, Karine.
Yes, hi. City of Laurel. I'm sitting here for Christina Cornwell, who is at a conference right now. So it's my pleasure to be here to take notes and help in any way I can.
Thank you. James Carter.
Yeah, good afternoon. James Carter. I work for Prince George's County's Office of Homeland Security, and I work out of our Critical Infrastructure Protection and Awareness Unit. Thank you.
Thank you. Anthony Klein.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Major Anthony Klein. I'm with the County Police Department, and I'm under the Bureau of Homeland Security and Intelligence.
Welcome. Ronaldo de Guzman.
Good afternoon, everyone. Ray de Guzman with Department of Permit Inspection and Enforcement, Site Road Plan Review Division.
Welcome. Jeffrey DeHaan.
Good afternoon, everybody. Jeff DeHaan, Associate Director for Stormwater Management Division with the Department of the Environment.
Right. Kim Finch.
Yes, hello, I'm Kim Finch. I'm an environmental planner with environmental planning section of the Prince George's County Planning Department.
Right. Frank Galosi.
Yeah, good afternoon, Dewberry and county members. Frank Galosi with the DOE, Department of Environment, Stormwater Management Division. Thanks.
And Dawn Hawkins-Nixon.
Good afternoon. I'm Dawn Hawkins-Nixon, Associate Director for Sustainability Division, Department of the Environment.
Joey Henderson.
Good afternoon. I'm Joey Henderson. I'm the manager for preparedness and outreach here in the Office of Homeland Security, Emergency Management Division.
Joanne Hall-Barr.
Hi, I'm Joanne Barr. I'm the Deputy City Administrator for the City of Laurel.
Welcome. Kelly Flint.
Hi, I work for Maryland Department of the Environment Dam Safety.
Welcome. James McClelland.
Good afternoon. James McClellan from the Fire EMS Department. I'm the Assistant Chief assigned to Operations.
Miles Rosner.
Yeah, Miles Rosner, GIS Analyst for City of Laurel.
Right. Sudhanshu Mishra. Apologize in advance.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. This is Sudhanshu Mishra, Assistant Associate Director, Stormwater Management Division, Department of the Environment.
All right, Jesse Nelson.
I'm Jesse Nelson. I'm a resilience planner at Dewberry.
And I introduced Jade already, and you'll be hearing more from her. Wanda Ramos.
Happy Wednesday. Wanda Ramos, Deputy Director, Parks and Recreation Department.
Welcome, Robert Love.
Good afternoon, Robert Love. I'm the Director of the Department of Economic and Community Development for the City of Laurel.
Hannah Rush.
Hello, I'm Hannah. I'm a geospatial analyst at Dewberry.
Joanna Smith.
Hi, everyone. This is Joanna Smith. I'm Department of the Environment, the construction section head here in Stormwater Management Division.
And last but not least, Stephanie Robinson.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stephanie Robinson. I work for emergency management in the city of Bowie.
Right. Joey or Hassan, any other comments before we jump in, or shall I jump right in?
Let's jump right in, Scott.
All right. Well, welcome, everybody. These introductions were lengthy, which is a very good thing because we're all about participation in this process. So it's really great to see a group of this size represented. We're here today, I believe, for the second Mitigation Advisory Committee meeting with an expanded committee. If we go to the next slide, I'll show the agenda. Today, we want to update you on the project status, talk about the hazard ID and risk assessment results, which is really kind of the heaviest lift part of the project, start to discuss the draft mitigation goals, and begin the process of brainstorming on projects, locations, and identification, and sort of talk to you about the things that we need to do to bring the project home on a tight schedule, but with the proper amount of input from you all. So appreciate you being here. Next slide. So next few slides are project status. This one is just to give kind of an overview of how the process goes. For those who haven't been involved in this process in the past, this is a requirement that in order to be eligible for certain forms of hazard mitigation funding for projects and planning and other things, you have to have an approved hazard mitigation plan that's updated every 5 years. So we're in the third or fourth update cycle for this plan. It's kind of a process of continuous improvement. This time around, the county and the city of Laurel wanted to kind of jump out ahead and meet some of the new requirements that are coming out in 2023. And so this slide goes through the basic steps and sort of talks about some of the differentiators between this go around and the last one. So it all begins with coordination and data collection. For this plan update, it'll be expanding from just a straight hazard mitigation plan to a hazard mitigation and climate adaptation plan. So during this data coordination and collection process, we're looking at we have collected things like regional climate projections, social vulnerability data, comprehensive plan data from the county. So a lot more of a deep dive into not only what is at risk and sort of a snapshot of today picture, but what will be at risk in the future and how we begin to start incorporating that into the risk assessment. The next step is to assess the risks, again, through a a lens of social vulnerability and changes that are happening in the environment, and also to look more carefully than we have in the past at future development. So that we're not only kind of coming up with strategies to address what's in harm's way currently, but we're coming up with strategies that are forward-looking and policy-oriented to make sure that mistakes aren't made as we grow and develop in the county, so that we don't put additional items and people and places in harm's way. There's a capabilities analysis where we look at what we're doing today via policy, regulations, planning, operational capabilities, emergency management capabilities, and sort of look at any gaps that are in those programs and policies and plans, and things that maybe could become a strategy to look at changing or enhancing. We look at integrating this plan into other things. The idea is not to have a standalone plan, but to sort of integrate climate adaptation and hazard mitigation into the daily operations of the county and the cities. And then, from those results of the hazard ID and risk assessment, we make it an informed set of mitigation strategies. So if you think of the risk assessment as the homework that you do before making an investment, and then those investment decisions are made on that, research that you did into your vulnerabilities. So we'll be starting that process today. You can see that we are here at the top of the slide. So this is about where we are in the process. Then we look at implementation. Again, we want to focus this time on measurable, implementable projects over a 5-year planning horizon. And then we'll talk about the review and adoption process that's required for the plan. And you'll see the line at the bottom for public and stakeholder outreach. We've been doing some of that as we've gone along. This meeting has incorporated many more stakeholders, so we'll talk some about that. The next slide. This shows you the calendar that we're on and where we're at. Again, at the top, you can see November in the yellow area. The risk assessment, again, and I said at the beginning, which is the hardest lift and the most labor-intensive piece, is done in draft. We're finalizing the written components to supplement the analysis, and that'll be available for review in the very near future. The next step is to focus on finalizing the capability assessment and revising the mitigation goals so that we can move into the strategy piece of the project, which is really the more fun part, truth be told. And the necessary schedule dictates that we get all of this completed and have a draft plan submitted to MDEM for review on a fairly quick turnaround, so that they can get it back to us with their comments and required changes, and we can incorporate those and move forward into the FEMA review process so that the plan can be adopted by March of next year. It seems March seems like a long way away, but it'll be upon us before we know it, and it's critical that the plan be approved and adopted in that time frame. So December will be a critical month, and there'll be a few more meetings probably of this committee and a lot of outreach and discussions and conversations happening to get that plan to where it needs to be in January. So thank you in advance for your cooperation. I know it's not ideal in the holiday season, but we're just on a very compressed schedule for this particular update. Next slide. I mentioned the capability assessment. I'll just say briefly that, again, that is currently underway. Most of the information is consistent with the 2017 plan update, but there are some good things that have happened since then that we'll be touching on. And you will be receiving a handout or a survey that'll be sent out to all the people on this group, to a larger audience probably as well at the county and the city of Laurel, to fill out any remaining gaps once the initial review of capabilities and update is completed, just to make sure we haven't missed anything. Public outreach to date. We had our first public meeting the other night, one night last week. There were 19 attendees, 6 of them were stakeholders, 5 were from the general public, and 8 were from this committee. So while those numbers are quite low by way of public meeting these days, they're actually not horrible. that a lot of times we struggle to get any members from the general public. So the fact that we had 5 was not wonderful, but encouraging, plus the 6 stakeholders. We've done a public survey that's been distributed via social media and email primarily. We've had 14 responses to that. Social media advertisements have had over 475 views and interactions. And then lastly, attached to the survey we did was called a story map, which is a map of the county where folks can go in and kind of drop pins, for lack of better words, on an area where there's a specific problem or concern that they want to bring to our attention, and provide information in a narrative format for that. And we had about 4 responses to that, which are shown by the dots on the map here. So we're going to transition now into the hazard ID and risk assessment, and Jade will kick us off, and we'll kind of kick it back and forth.
Hi, everyone. So I'm going to go through just an overview intro to what the review of the risk assessment results will be like. So I know that some of you attended the public meeting last week, and we didn't want to make things too repetitive. That recording of that meeting will be available online as well for you to view if you'd like to see that. But for today's meeting, we just wanted to stick to providing an overview of the new components of the risk assessment. So this would include the climate projections that are being integrated, social vulnerability elements, and the future development aspects that will also be integrated. We'll also be looking at some of the results, but really honing in on providing an overview of the new and emerging risks that we were able to identify from the risk assessment as compared to the 2017 results. So we can really focus on what's changing and let that inform some of the projects and project locations that we're going to focus in on. And just to reiterate, I know that Scott mentioned it, but the full draft risk assessment chapter will be circulated to you guys in the county and city for review before it is sent to the state for their preliminary review. So that will have all the details for all the hazards in there that you can dig into, and we encourage you to dig into and provide comments as needed, but we'll just stick to providing an overview today. So the first piece, looking at the climate projections, this is just kind of the high level takeaways that we found as the outlook is showing for Prince George's County and the city. So for temperature, days above 90 degrees, it's expected to more than double by 2044, and days with maximum temperatures below 32 degrees are expected to decrease to closer to 0. So overall, expecting a general warming, and that will lead to milder winters, fewer extreme cold days, and potentially more intense winter storm events due to the increased moisture from the warmer temperatures. So that can have some implications, not just it's temperature affecting extreme heat and extreme cold, but also as it can affect other hazards, severe storms, whether that's a general thunderstorm or a severe winter storm as well. Precipitation. So overall, there's projected to be a decrease in total wet days, so days where we see some precipitation rainfall, but overall an increase in the annual amount of precipitation expected by around mid-century. So that's really just highlighting that we'll have more rain, but falling in fewer rain events. That's the typical higher intensity, shorter duration events that a lot of jurisdictions are dealing with these days. It can lead to some flash flooding. So we want to make sure that we're prepared for that. As far as sea level rise goes, it's pretty consistent through the end of the century. It's projected that 0.2% of the county will be impacted. So this is sea level rise isn't or I should say coastal flooding isn't a hazard that's ranked too high within the county within this plan, and that's pretty consistent with what we found in the climate projections. And then finally, for severe storms, hurricanes are expected to bring about 25% more rainfall when they do hit land and rapidly intensify. So seeing that strengthening in like a 24-hour period. Just being ready for that. And I just want to note that it's not saying that, we'll have more, tropical cyclones of some sort. It's more about the intensity and the amount of rainfall that will be brought because they tend to stall out a bit more. And then just briefly wanted to mention some of the hazards that aren't specifically called out here, but the climate are dependent on some of the climate interaction. So drought and wildfire mainly. We're projected to see a slight increase in consecutive dry days, but overall increases in temperature and precipitation are expected to balance out for the most part, and that would be what would affect drought and wildfire. So overall, it seems like conditions kind of balance out and won't be affecting too much there through 2044. As far as social vulnerability goes, we used the CDC's social vulnerability index here, mainly because that is what FEMA and federal government has been using with some of their recent changes, specifically Justice 40 initiative that they are implementing. So a lot of the hazard mitigation assistance grants are now turning to incorporate some social vulnerability index scores into their grant application process. So we want to make sure that we're highlighting that within the county and within the city and allowing that to be linked not only throughout the risk assessment, but also in the upcoming mitigation strategy where we have projects. So this just provides an overview of the SVI results for the county. So as if you compare them nationally, which is this top table, overall score of 0.81, which is considered high vulnerability. And then from there, it's broken down into the 4 components that make up the overall score. So you'll see socioeconomic status and household characteristics are in the medium to high category. And then racial and ethnic minority status and housing type and transportation are again in high vulnerability. And then under that is the SVI scores if they are just compared within the state of Maryland. So it gives you an idea of what Prince George's County's social vulnerability is looking like compared to other counties and areas within the state. So again, it ranks high vulnerability, and you'll see overall the scores are just a bit increased. So I thought it was helpful to include both of those. And the good news here is it will help hopefully provide access to additional funding. And all of this is definitely insightful as we were looking at where some of these hazard areas are to see if there's overlap between these socially vulnerable areas and some of these spatial hazards. And this is just providing another view instead of a map of the SVI scores for the whole county and surrounding counties. This is just looking at the census tracts. So you can see the scores with a bit more granularity. So there's relatively lower vulnerability in districts 4 and 9, but relatively higher, consistently higher throughout the other districts, including the city of Laurel. And like I said, this will help us identify and prioritize some projects to make sure that we are providing most benefits for those who need them most. And then finally, I just wanted to touch on some of the comprehensive planning integration that we're going to have in the plan. We're incorporating the comprehensive plan, so PG Plan 2035. There's a growth policy map in there, and we were able to pull in some planning data that was incorporated that includes some environmental features, some planned transportation, development patterns, projected growth, and it really just highlights those areas where there's going to be a lot of people, a lot of development, important businesses, and economic concerns and things like that. So like Scott had mentioned before, we're planning for the future and, not just current conditions, but where things will be in the future, and just making sure we're covering all our bases there. And then finally, before I pass it over to Scott, this is just the hazard ranking priority that shows the 2017 ranking of all the hazards alongside the current updated rankings. You'll see remained consistent apart from extreme heat, which was bumped up to medium high. And this is consistent with the county's climate action plan, the ranking of extreme heat within the state of Maryland at the state level, as well as the National Risk Index ranking for extreme heat within the county as well.
Right, I'm going to talk through the flood hazard and the analysis that we did. We're fortunate this go around. The previous plan updates have not had a large enough budget to use loss estimation modeling software, and the county was able to find the resources to allow us to do that this time around. So we used a tool called Hazard. It was developed by FEMA about maybe a decade and a half ago, and it's been subsequently updated many times. You can see we used version 5.1, and the flooding module in Hazard, what it does, and I'll try to explain this as simply as possible, but it takes large data sets such as building stock data sets that look at what buildings are residential versus commercial versus institutional, industrial, etc. It has characteristics of those buildings, sometimes fairly aggregate characteristics, but it looks at percentages of buildings with full basements versus on slabs on grade versus crawl spaces. It looks at demographic data, and it looks at topographic data, and a bunch of other things too, economic data. And it essentially takes different FEMA flooding scenarios and it plugs them into the topography and intersects them with the built environment and the populated environment to do some estimation of what damages might occur during a specific flood event scenario. In this case, we modeled the FEMA 100-year flood, which is a flood that has a 1% chance of being exceeded in any given year. And we combined both the riverine flooding model and the coastal flood modules. And that the coastal is the area above the or adjacent to the tidally influenced river. So we ran that model using the base data for the entire county and the city of Laurel. This map shows where the hazards are highest, with the blue areas being the lower dollar risks, and the yellow areas having the yellow on up, I guess the red areas having the highest dollar risk. This is census tract based as well. That's how the model captures the data. You can see no significant surprises. It's along the highest risk is along the water courses where there's the highest density of development. If you go to the next slide, we zoom in on a few areas. The first one is the western part of District 3 and the southernmost part of District 2. You can start to see at the smaller political jurisdiction level where the risk is. So that what this does is allows you to do further investigation of what the causes of those flooding is in those areas, what is there at risk. It sort of allows you to hone in on your investigation in areas that may be combined with social vulnerability and other things to determine just exactly, where you might want to target your mitigation actions and strategies. Next map. And this one is District 4 and District 6 and the northern part of District 9. Same depiction, just a different zoomed in example. This slide shows the 100-year flood limits that Hazard used for this exercise or to run the model. Based on that scenario, there's about 2,300 buildings that would have at least moderate damage during this particular flood scenario, and just under 2,200 that would be completely destroyed. And when we say completely destroyed in flood, that doesn't equate to the pictures you see after a tornado necessarily. It just means that the water would get high enough into the building to essentially damage it more than the building's value, to the point where you'd need to tear it down and replace it with a different building. The next slide shows a table. I'm not going to get into these dollars, but I just want to show you the different types of losses. So it calculates building losses, content losses, inventory, and then it also calculates economic losses such as losses to income, losses to wages, rental income, relocation expenses. The model calculates potential debris from some storms, and it'll be broken out. For example, we can break out these numbers to be specific to Laurel by comparison to the overall county, but these are the general categories of estimated damages that it gives. And it's important to note for this is assuming that every water course that's mapped in the community is experiencing this same 100-year flood event at the same time, which in reality doesn't usually happen exactly that way. But it gives you, so that the numbers may be very high in some cases, but what it does is it allows you to compare one census tract area to another and do a relative analysis of where the risk is higher. So that, in my mind, is really more important than the numbers. But where the numbers are important is to be able to, when you're going to your elected officials or you're developing your capital budget and things like that, you have some demonstration of the risk is real, and these are the dollar damages that we're facing in this sort of worst case scenario. So they do serve a purpose. Next slide. This shows the areas that were modeled with the coastal module along the Patuxent River. Sorry, it's a relatively low development area. So the next slide will show that the numbers for losses for the coastal part of this analysis are very much lower than the numbers were for the inland riverine associated flooding. This is consistent with the climate projections that show only 2% or 0.2% of the county faces impacts from sea level rise, and the loss numbers are much more realistic compared to the 2017 risk assessment, which was exposure based. So in 2017, all we did is took the flood areas and put them over the top of the buildings and said, here are all the buildings in the flood area. This is what these buildings are worth, and that's exposure. This is actually loss estimation. So if you have $1 million building sitting there, last go around, we said you have $1 million of exposure. This go around, we're saying in this event, that $1 million building might get $222,000 worth of damage. So that's kind of the difference between the last analysis and this one. So that's a quick overview of what we did with flooding, and I'll turn it over to Jade, and she'll take us back through some of the other hazards.
All right. So I just want to highlight that we're not, as I mentioned before, we're not going through all the hazards here. We tried to definitely want to include flooding because we know that is a big concern. So Scott provided an overview of that. And we're going to go through some of the higher ranked hazards and how those risk assessment results from this go around differed from the 2017 results. So we'll start with the higher ranked hazards and then work our way down the table there. So for severe storm, this is just looking at the flood related impacts from severe storm. This provides the annualized damages and annualized events here highlighted in green. Just want to note that the annualized events decreased by about 1.5 events. So, annualized, so you're going to get some points here. 0.5 of an event is a little bit hard to damage, or hard to picture, but 1 to 2 events per year difference compared with what was projected from the 2017 risk assessment. And then the annualized damages decreased by about $100,000 as compared to the last risk assessment. So for tornado, this just provides an overview of like the most recent tornadoes that the county has experienced. So there's been 5 since 2012. Annualized events remain pretty low, damages relatively low. Just want to note that FEMA and the state do rank tornado as moderately high to high, depending on the ranking system that's being used. mostly due to the population and property exposure. You can't predict where a tornado is going to end up. So there is a lot of exposure there, and that's usually why tornado gets ranked so high. And, you know, when it does hit, it can be all of a sudden, low warning, high impact. You know, we've seen that it can be completely devastating. So even though there's low events, low annualized events and damages, that could drastically change just from, you know, one new event occurring. So for hurricane, we did use HAZUS, the hurricane module in HAZUS to provide some results as well. So we looked at annualized loss and exposure. I'm not going to get into all of these numbers. You can dig into them when we provide the draft risk assessment if you would like, but it does break it down for the City of Laurel, Joint Base Andrews, and the county as a whole, and then provides some totals at the bottom. And it looks at overall inventory, contents, building loss, and then provide some total loss on the right-hand side. Just wanted to note that the 2017 risk assessment provided annualized damages that were about $500,000 and annualized events were about 0.15. So it's a little bit different here, and we are using HAZUS this go around and not just solely relying on a historical analysis for loss estimation. So this is just a map to go along with the table. So this visually shows you some total annualized loss results from the probabilistic scenario that was run. You can see, so the same sort of breakdown. Blue is going to be less predicted annualized loss, and the red areas are areas of more concern, potentially would experience more loss with some of these hurricane events. So winter storm, we have some annualized events and damages here as well. Wanted to note that there's been an increase in about one event per year compared to the last risk assessment. And this is consistent with the climate projections that we discussed earlier, which referenced rising temperatures leading to increased moisture in the air. And that can lead to increased winter precipitation. So this trend is expected to continue. So high or strong wind events, again, providing some annualized information here. Both annualized events and damages dropped slightly compared to the last risk assessment. Roughly has stayed the same though. So nothing too different here to report. And then getting into extreme heat. So if you'll remember, this is the hazard that did move up in the hazard rankings. So we have a couple slides on this here, since this is the one that has experienced the most change in the rankings. So the most at-risk districts contain the largest populations of senior citizens who are usually most at risk for extreme heat are District 1, City of Laurel, and then Districts 5, 6, and 8. Annualized heat and excessive heat events have increased to 3.1. So we have seen an increase since the last risk assessment. And then this map just shows overall the more senior population and where they currently reside according to 2020 census data. And then this is just showing some tree cover. Just wanted to highlight some areas of tree cover gain and loss, since that is one of the ways that we can mitigate some of the effects of extreme heat. So just highlighting some potential areas of change here. So blue is showing increases in tree cover, and the pink color is showing losses in tree cover. And this is over a period from about 2000 to 2021. Then just zooming in here to the City of Laurel, we have the smaller map that's purple in color, and the bottom right is showing that population of those 65 and older within the City of Laurel, and then showing the tree cover gain and loss on the left-hand side. And again, that's over a period of about 20 years. So just wanted to highlight some areas potentially of concern. But overall, it roughly balanced out. I think there was like 7% decrease in tree cover and a 6% increase. So kind of swapping out some areas as far as tree cover goes, but it's just important to notice where those are happening, especially if it's happening in an area, you know, if you're losing some tree cover in an area of higher vulnerability, then that could be something where we would want to include a strategy or project in the mitigation strategy to help prevent and alleviate some of that. So as far as dam exposure goes, the dam section as a whole was completely overhauled. We wanted to make sure we were meeting all the new requirements for the high hazard dam grants that are out there. So there were an overhaul of the outreach portion of the plan as far as dam owners go. So we have a survey that's going on with that to hopefully get some additional information that we can incorporate into the mitigation strategy. But for the risk assessment, we included some inundation mapping, and we did that for several dams. I think we have 7 that had that we had inundation data for. So we were able to include all of those, and along with that include some potential property exposure. So again, this is similar to what Scott had mentioned earlier. This is exposure. So we basically took these inundation zones and we overlaid that with the properties, so the structures that lie in those inundation zones, and provided all those values here. So, you know, if you have a dam failure and that inundation zone is impacted, you know, you're not going to see all of this damage all at once. The building's, you know, not going to be raised completely. So, you know, something to note that this is exposure that we're working with here, and that's why some of the numbers are so high. So this is an example of one of the maps that we included. The full risk assessment chapter will have plenty more in there if you want to dig into some specific dams and their inundation zones, but just wanted to provide an overall map that includes all the inundation zones, and they are pretty small, so it'll be easier to see it when you're in the chapter, but there are some, especially in District 1, there were quite a few up there, and you can see the blue is where those inundation zones lie, so those could be potential areas of concern. All right, so that was just providing a brief overview of kind of the highlights and top level takeaways from the risk assessment. This time around, there'll be plenty more details in the draft chapter that you can dig into later on. But this next portion, we just wanted to go into the draft mitigation goals, discuss a little bit about the proposed changes, and then get into determining some potential objectives. So some of you may have seen this slide before. The 2017 plan's goal is on the left-hand side. So it kind of had one overarching goal for both the county and the city of Laurel, and then 2 kind of objectives underneath focused on public awareness and just mitigating risks in general. We wanted to integrate the Maryland State Hazard Mitigation Plan goals and objectives, the comprehensive plan goals, as well as some of the top concerns that were outlined by FEMA in their recently updated mitigation policies. So from that, we have some strategic goal categories that we wanted to focus in on. So physical mitigation projects, capability and capacity building, public awareness and education, and more forward-looking policy and planning, which can speak to that future development and climate projections and kind of capture some of the mitigation that can be done to help prevent future damages based on those. And overall, the 2017 goal we're thinking could be more turned into more of a vision that we can include in the plan, so that, you know, we're not losing that, we're just kind of expanding upon aspects of it with these strategic categories, and then further expanding with some objectives. So these are the potential mitigation goals that we wanted to propose to the committee. We did share this with the public last week. So we're eager to get some feedback on here. These are the counties and the city's goals. We want them to be representative of what the county and city truly want to see happen. So these are merely suggestions. You can come up with something entirely new. You can change as many words as you'd like, but we wanted to give you something to react to. So the first one just deals with implementing projects that would mitigate the risks of natural hazards to people, infrastructure, and environmental aspects or assets while equitably distributing project benefits. Oops, jumped ahead too quick. So the second one focuses on capability and capacity building. So this can deal with regular staff training, making sure we're including responsibilities for hazard mitigation elements into specific positions or departments or offices, and then ensuring climate adaptation is adequately considered and addressed in all county and city actions as appropriate. The second to last one, increasing public awareness of natural hazards to people and property and promote current and new opportunities to participate in mitigation planning. And then finally, the last one is that forward-looking one. So prevent future climate-related damages and losses to communities, critical facilities, and natural resources through ordinances, policies, and plans that are aligned with regional and state resilience and equity goals. Okay, so what I was thinking is I have each one of the goals split up on a few different slides. So this first one is the mitigation projects goal that we had before. I would love to hear, if you have any thoughts on it, any feedback, if you feel like something's missing, something should be changed, would love to hear about that, but also really get into some of the objectives here. So if there is a specific piece of critical infrastructure or, a type of critical infrastructure that you feel we should be focusing on and coming up with some mitigation projects to address. I would love to hear about that. If there's any important environmental assets, that would be very helpful to hear about. And then also, if you know of any areas within the county or the city, they could be like socially vulnerable neighborhoods. They could be neighborhoods that you just notice are feeling the brunt of some of these hazards quite often, and you feel like we should pay special attention to see how we could help them out. That could be something we could include as an objective. Overall, we just want the objectives to be a bit more specific, something that could be measured. So, we could say we would want to increase the amount of projects being done in this specific area of the county, or mitigate X number of pieces of critical infrastructure or something like that. So I'll kind of open up the floor, give you some time to think about this. And if anybody, you can use the chat to chime in with anything. If you have anything to share, or you can just come off of mute and let us know any thoughts. I'll give some time for you guys to think this one over.
This is Joey. So I know this objective is fairly broad, but I would like to hear from folks. Do we really want to be more specific? Because if we are more specific, then I think FEMA would hold us to that. And as we know, things are constantly changing. So our priorities that we outline in this plan in 2 years could definitely change.
Yeah, that's definitely true. We tried to include, so each one of these goals, we tried to cover kind of the main areas where you could focus some mitigation actions and projects on. So, capability, capacity building, looking at policies and plans, physical projects, and outreach. So, objectives, you can get more specific, but definitely if you feel like that's not something you want to do, I would also that's very valuable feedback. Would love to hear about that as well.
Mhm. So, Jade, yeah, this is Frank with DOE. My opinion on the overall objective is where it mentions equitably, assigning the benefits. I think the part that we did work with and is most time consuming is property owner buy-in. So it really relates to property rights. We want environmental uplift, but we don't want to be restricted by what we can do with the property. And same with flooding. We want flood benefits, but we do not want a drainage easement on our property. So I think something generally that says while preserving property rights, or, I think that to me is a critical component of any CIP that we physically implement.
Okay, great. Yeah, that is great feedback. Thank you so much.
Jade, I do have a couple of questions about the social vulnerability index that you for District 9 and 4 during the risk and so SPI index analysis, so it was lower than the other region. It was because of the population, because I know the region 9 transportation is, we don't have public transportation too much region 9. So as the region 2, 1, 3, the transportation is an issue. Like if you want to consider as like one of the social vulnerability index or SPI index. So what was the reason you found out during this analysis?
Yeah, overall, it was just the population differences in those districts is what led to it. Some of the other areas are just so dense, and the makeup of that population really affected some of those 4 themes. In the plan, I mentioned that we want to include these SVI scores because this is one of the things that FEMA looks at for BRIC and FMA now. So we're going to include more in-depth kind of look at the breakdown of these scores and really hone in on all the census tracts and highlight all the census tracts that kind of reach that bar of social vulnerability that FEMA is looking for. And for the ones that don't, we're going to include a breakdown of, some of those themes, because we found that even if the overall SVI score doesn't meet FEMA's bar that they've set, which can change from year to year, if one of the SVI themes does, we want to make sure that that's highlighted. So we're going to have, a thorough analysis of all that in there so that all those nuances are pretty clear, and that will definitely help inform any future grant applications as well.
Okay, and so during the the section about the dams, so I know we do have more number of dams that they're kind of potentially high hazard dams. If you want to add it to element G of the this plan, like HHPD program. So are you going to consider those? Because I know that the county and municipalities submitted some information or data regarding those dams. So you're going to include it in that section, or you're just going to just take it out and just keep that 7 dams?
So the dam failure section itself contains all the dams that we were provided data for. So it's quite a few. The ones that we were just talking about in the slides earlier, that was just the ones that we had the inundation mapping for, but we have information from the dam inventory for all the dams, and we also have the information for the levees that's in that dam section. So it gets much more into detail there. It was just definitely way too many dams to cover in this presentation.
And one more thing, I think you missed the College Park tornado 2001 was a EF3.
Yeah, we saw that was your highest one. I think the kind of excerpt of tornadoes that we had in here were just the ones since 2012, I think, or there was kind of like a cutoff date because we have kind of a bigger list of more detailed information for each of the tornadoes in the plan. And after a certain amount of time, we kind of move those to the appendix since it can get pretty lengthy, including them all in there. But we did highlight that one in the main tornado section itself because it had such a big impact.
Thank
you. Yeah, thank you for your questions. If we don't have any other comments on this slide, I can move over to the next goal so we can talk about any potential objectives there. Okay. So this next one is focusing on capability and capacity building. So this is really like the inner workings of the county and city government infrastructure. So any potential priorities here could be looking at departments or offices that you feel could focus more on hazard mitigation. So this could mean providing additional training or trying to adjust some internal priorities to incorporate hazard mitigation, determining who's responsible for carrying out these activities and priorities year round, and saying, do they need additional help? Do we need to outline some of these responsibilities a bit more so they're laid out and a bit more clear. Like I mentioned, any kind of training that you think would be useful for any current or future staff. And then any concerns, capability and capacity concerns around applying for mitigation grants. So I'd love to hear if you feel like you struggle with that, as grant application season comes around. Is it tough to find the amount, people who can do the work? Do you have people who would be willing to do the work, but kind of don't know where to start? And there could be a capability issue there where there could be some additional training or potentially taking advantage of some of the technical assistance that FEMA offers. Any of this information would help us develop out the mitigation strategy a bit more. So not only including some beneficial objectives that would help us focus some of the mitigation or help us focus on what kind of mitigation projects to include, but it can help us understand where we should focus more of our time as we build out the mitigation strategy section. So if you feel that this is a big area where you could see some more focus being spent, then we could develop out some more information on the technical assistance out there that is available. We could spend some time linking that to specific projects. So it's much easier to jump into the plan, find a project you want to do, and immediately see what kind of resources you would like to access. So anything around capability and capacity within the county or city structure. Love to hear any comments about that. I saw a comment in the chat. Would love to start with basic awareness of all staff about having a hazard mitigation plan. Yes, definitely agree. That's one of our questions in the hazard mitigation survey that we send out, and all the jurisdictions that I've helped with hazard mitigation planning, that's one of the biggest things that stand out is so many people just don't know that a hazard mitigation plan is out there. So that is a great comment. We'll definitely write that down.
And Jay, this is Dawn. This is Dawn. Also, I think that there's a huge need for awareness of the federal dollars that are coming down to the states and local governments for specific type of hazard mitigation and climate resilience projects. And due to that, just abundance of dollars from various sources, I think it's very helpful to know which federal dollars apply to what, right? What federal agencies might be availing monies to help local governments address these mitigation and climate resilience needs.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that would be addressed by spending more time making sure that all of the projects and actions included in the plan are linked to specific programs, like in a table?
That would be helpful, right?
Okay.
Right. It would help us to narrow down a little bit as to where we focus our efforts in terms of trying to obtain grant dollars or federal loans.
And can I ask when, so when these like notices of funding opportunity come out from FEMA, for instance, is there any kind of like internal processes at work that distributes that information within the county, or is it just kind of if you know, if you're paying attention, you see it, and that's how the information gets passed around? Is there anything that's like formalized that notifies people within the county or city when this grant funding becomes available?
Usually that comes from Joey's shop, right? Joey Henderson's shop. And I think I saw ASOT just turn on its mic.
Yes, so OHS does try to push out that information to our partnering agencies and our municipalities. I'll tell you that not every hazard mitigation grant comes from FEMA. You know, so I mean there's other grants out there that as I think Don stated, that we don't have any visibility on. You know, it could come through the EPA being onto Maryland Department of Environment, you know, or it could come through you know, some other grant form. So we try to stay abreast of as many as we can, but typically we only know about those that are coming from FEMA in terms of the, you know, the BRIC grants and the HMGP grants.
Yeah, I mean, there are like EPA based on the Clean Water Act provides some specific like mitigation grants for if some area impacted by like flooding, and for example the water treatment has been impacted, so they can request for mitigation grants. And also Department of Energy, Department of Environment, I mean the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, and also Army Corps of Engineers. So they provide some types of grants, but again, the federal cost share and local cost share would be different based on the type of the grants. And based on the question you put in the slides, the majority of mitigation projects, like at the county level, as Department of Environment, Department of Public Works and Transportation, and these two major like agencies are responsible for most of the county hazard mitigation projects. I mean, and they're cooperating with the local municipalities to work with them because they have limited resources.
Okay.
And I think by advancing heat as a medium-high hazard, I would imagine that departments such as the health department, maybe park and planning, maybe social services, would also perhaps be departments interested in the grants that would be made available to address extreme heat.
And that gives a whole different line of grants. You know,
right.
So now you're looking at possibly HHS providing funding. It may not directly tie into hazard mitigation, but I mean, there's a possibility.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, a lot of these projects, if you can just emphasize some of these like co-benefits, especially relating to sustainability, that can access some additional funding. So you can definitely be creative in order to access funding, but sounding like it's difficult to get the necessary visibility to just understand the breadth of what's out there as far as funding goes. So that's great information for us to have. We will definitely try and incorporate that into the mitigation strategy and maybe build out a section specifically focusing on funding, providing not only like an overview of the FEMA grant programs that are out there, but some of the other programs and where to access information on those. And maybe that can be a potential action that we can include in the mitigation strategy that would be, you know, tasking someone with the responsibility or an office with the responsibility of going down this list, you know, every grant season, whatever it is, to see what funding is available, just so the county and the city can get kind of a comprehensive picture as that funding becomes available.
Also, just want to highlight the point that regarding the capability and capacity concerns. So most of the local municipalities, even like some, I would say the county as a whole, like they have, for example, if they need some sort of technical assistance for the grants application, like specifically when we get to the like benefit cost analysis. So benefit cost analysis is the technical aspects, and most of the municipalities, local jurisdictions, they don't have resource or capacity to do the BCA by themselves, and they don't have staffs trained to do it. So it would be also good to consider in like mitigation strategies, like the training, like also the technical assistance.
Okay, yeah, that's definitely helpful. We can include something on that. And is that just, is that mostly for any of the jurisdictions within the county, or is that like including the county itself?
I would say including the county, also like municipalities and including the county agencies, because it was the most challenging part of like grant applications for the HMGP applications, break application. Those they need like BCA calculation. Aside from those that they are project scoping or planning, they're not required to have a BCA. But other than all of those other like projects, they're required to have a BCA.
Okay, yeah. All right, that is very helpful. Thank you. Any other comments on this goal or this topic before we move on to the next one? Nope. Do we have a hand up? Kelly?
Yeah, also, I was just reading through the HHDP NOFO for 2022, and you have to have a hazard mitigation plan to qualify, which you guys have, but it specifically says that, I don't know if you guys have looked through it, that the hazard mitigation plan has to include all risks to dams and also comply with the disaster mitigation plan. So just so you know, like if they did want to pursue the HHPD, the hazard mitigation plan would have to include that information.
Yeah, definitely good point. Yeah, one of our goals for this plan was to meet all those HHPD requirements. So we're making sure that's in the mitigation or the risk assessment chapter that will be out for review fairly soon. And it will especially be helpful to have that be reviewed, that preliminary review at the state level, to make sure we're really hitting all those points and making sure that we're gonna make sure you guys are eligible for that grant. Yeah, so great information. Okay, so the second to last one. So the goal here, this is the one focusing on public awareness to natural hazards. So promoting current and new opportunities to participate in planning, as well as just increasing general awareness. So just hoping to hear a bit about how the public is usually involved year round, if they are in hazard mitigation related matters. And if this is something you'd want to improve, would you want us to include an objective or projects or something related to this? And also if there are specific groups or communities that you would like to see outreach increase to, that's something we could also focus on.
Well, I would at least say in our community that we want to be recognizing the non-English speaking members of our community to ensure that they're getting this outreach and getting as much information as we can get out to them.
Definitely. Do you guys, does the county or city have like ongoing communication in their native language that covers topics similar to hazard mitigation? Maybe something from like the health department or something that goes out regularly that
well, we do, and we do try and you know, having our social media platform has certainly increased. We now have a local newspaper that has definitely made it a little bit easier to reach out to people. But we don't know if we're reaching those individuals so much. We don't get that kind of feedback, and you know, don't see as many people that are attending meetings and those types of things. So we can't really gauge with 100% accuracy.
Okay, gotcha. That is very helpful.
And I often wonder about how the public finds out about hazard mitigation plans. And I'm wondering if there's some validity to setting up, I don't know, a county webpage, hazard mitigation plan webpage where people can go into to find information and thereby create a greater awareness for the presence of the plan and what's in the plan. Right. Because at this time, I think Joey Ason, correct me, on DOE's webpage, we have some information about hazard mitigation plan. And I know Office of Homeland Security, you guys have a page for hazard mitigation plan, but I don't know if there's like that one centric webpage.
No, there is not one centric. You're right.
Yeah, so that's a good point. So maybe including something to build out and create that one central point, so it can. So I think the at least the Office of Homeland Security webpage, I think it seems to be more just for like this 5-year update process. So spending the extra time to build that out a bit more and really provide some additional resources and information on how the public can learn more and stay involved year round if they're, you know, hungry for additional information or seeking some help with hazard mitigation. I think that would be a great thing to have. And if you guys have something similar for another topic within the county that you feel is a good example, definitely feel free to share that either now or, you know, in the chat, or email me if you think of something, because that can definitely help inform how we write out this action if we know the type of thing that you guys already have and are able to build in-house. Okay, let's move on to the final one. So this is the one that's a bit more future or forward-looking, deals with a lot of policy and planning. So if there's specific goals or objectives that you think would fit into this hazard mitigation plan somehow, or you think we should link back to them in some way that are present in another like county, city, regional, or state plan or framework, definitely want to hear about that. We have been reviewing these different plans and frameworks ourselves, but if there's something that you notice you definitely want to make sure is in there, we love to hear about that. Additionally, if there's any ordinance changes that you think would be politically feasible, if you don't think any ordinance changes would be politically feasible, that's also helpful to know. So this could be related to building standards. I know you guys, I think, are at the 2018 International Building Code adoption currently. So, you know, upgrading or adopting the latest code, if that would be feasible, or having stricter regulations in the floodplain, any policy changes, any information about whether you want to prioritize that or you don't think that's feasible and therefore don't want to focus on it as much. All of that information would be helpful.
This is Stephanie Robinson from Bowie. So we have a climate action plan that was introduced, I think it's 2022, 2025, and it specifically outlines resiliency and implementing more electrical grid stuff to get us off of natural gas and stuff like that. And I can send that. I've already given it to Isan, and I can make sure you guys have access to that. But I definitely think if we're doing a hazard mitigation plan, stressing building codes to keep people out of the floodplain should be in it. It shouldn't be even be up for debate.
And the county does have a climate action plan.
Yes. Okay, perfect. Yeah, we have both of those, and we've been reviewing it. But I'm glad you mentioned the grid portion. Modifications to the electrical grid. FEMA does provide funding for microgrids. So if that's something that you think would be helpful to include, if that's in some of these municipal level plans, and we want to include that here as well to provide access to funding, because FEMA would love to see that in the hazard mitigation plan, we can definitely include something on that.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I would love to see something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the county's climate action plan also has recommendations for deployment or development of microgrids in communities. So I think that's a great idea.
Okay, perfect. I will make sure that's included in there for sure. Patrick, thank you very much for sending that link.
Yeah, we can do this in-house. I mean, that's a great platform to build a site, public outreach site. They've been very successful with their Vision Zero project.
Yeah, this is perfect. Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for sending that. We will definitely build out or include that in the mitigation strategy. Make sure that gets put in there. Okay. See, so if there's no other thoughts on this one, can move on to the next slides. We don't have too much longer left. So this last little bit that I wanted to focus on, basically just provide an opportunity for anyone that's a part of this committee, so anyone that's on the call, to suggest any potential projects or project locations. It could be based off of what you saw in the presentation earlier. If you notice there was an area of like flooding concern, for instance, and you really think we should be addressing that, or if you notice something just in your everyday experience, either yourself, living in the county, working in the county, that would be helpful to hear about, there's a road that's flooding, or you think there's a specific, critical facility that could use a mitigation project. Any of that, we'd love to hear about it. We can definitely make sure that's included in the plan.
So generally, I mean, I think since like a year ago, FEMA is just kind of emphasizing the nature-based solutions strategies. So a combination of the green and gray infrastructures as a mitigation strategies and long-term mitigation strategies, instead of just looking at the short-term strategies. It's kind of like, I think we need to consider in our like hazard mitigation plan, because FEMA is shifting through that way. So we may get some, we may have more opportunity to apply for other type of grants, and also because it's in our like hazard mitigation plan, we can justify our like kind of projects based on that. And We do have a couple of like nature-based solutions. We have done it in our county, but it's not too much. Or sometimes like the project depends on the location of the mitigation project. A combination of both would be perfect, and not just one of them. So I would also consider in our plan.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, that's definitely helpful. Yeah, especially with FEMA grants, as they, have this, they're putting out these notices of funding opportunity every year, and they're including this SVI requirements that can get you a lot of points, and also nature-based solutions. Like when you start kind of stacking these things together and hitting FEMA's priorities, it, makes it a lot more likely that you're going to end up getting that funding and getting your grant application approved. So definitely good to include those. We have a hand raise. Jeffrey?
Yeah, thanks. I think it's a couple of points of interest and of importance is to when we look at the, we're talking about potential projects in discussion, it's as important to identify routine work or maintenance otherwise that also contributes to flood reduction. By that I mean new products are always, they're fantastic and they have a great opportunity to leverage either an or betterment to an existing condition, whether it's infrastructure or dams by way of example. But it's also important for us, I think, to identify routine maintenance that the county performs on public infrastructure, whether there's stormwater management ponds, stormwater conveyance channels, whether it's storm drain rehabilitation or cleaning. There should be a way and a metric to capture that information, at least like on an annual basis, because those maintenance activities also reduce and help address and minimize flooding just by ample conveyance and maintaining the infrastructure that we have at our hands. So there should be a way for us to integrate that type of data set and that performance metric as part of our response package with forecasts on what that maintenance program may look like. In addition to just identifying the new projects. And we should also be able to, if possible, I'm not trying to create more work by any means for anybody, including my staff and our operation, obviously, but measurement and data is important. In other words, just to give you a comparison, we were also operating under the NPDES permit, the MS4 permit that mandates performance metrics for impervious surface restoration. Well, as we progress through those permit cycles, we report on performance metrics, and it's a good feedback to the communities and the public to understand result for expenditure. So if we're able to quantify where we're going out and doing these type of maintenance operations or products that increase capacity, like on a dam, pond, or another restoration project, or we're improving a conveyance system that's going to increase quantitative, like cubic feet, you're going to increase the volume of control from the stormwater side, mitigate CFS through a flood area. I think it's important for us to be able to capture that. I don't know if it resonates exactly with the HMP, but I think the HMP should have a metric in there that provides or drives that type of data capture and communication, because it all lends itself to the perception of what is the government doing with regards to mitigation. What are we actually seeing in terms of results?
Yeah, absolutely. That is definitely a good point. I think we can incorporate that in there, whether we decide to include it as, a mitigation action or something we want to prioritize as a capability within the county or city. I think it would be useful to do that. We can also, try and come up with ways that as we're doing these or performing or implementing these mitigation projects and actions, that we're also trying to capture that and have that data and those metrics in like one central place so that we can pull from it. Because I think it's definitely helpful when trying to build, like political will or trying to include some of that data in future grant applications to show that the county has been effective in the past and will use that money well, all of that will definitely help. So I think it can be useful in a ton of different ways.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Any other projects that anyone can think of, projects or actions? It doesn't have to be a physical mitigation project, although that could be great too. Or locations, there's an intersection that floods or a parking lot or a certain building or something like that. Can make note of it.
So where would we fit in the need for resilience hubs? So with all, the various hazards that the county is at risk for, there's some need for those centers where communities can go to receive just basic interim services or needs until their homes, I don't know, utility service can be restored to their homes, or they can get other assistance with housing or the like. How do we fit that need for resilience hubs into the hazard mitigation plan?
Yeah, I mean, I think we could definitely include that as an action in the mitigation strategy. And I think it would be additionally helpful if we could use some of the work from the risk assessment to identify some potential areas of interest. So some potential communities where we would, for sure want to be including one of these resilience hubs. I'm sure you know that Baltimore does this, and so they have a great model that we can look at. And if you want to look at that and see if there's elements of it you really like, if there's things that you would change, all of that information would be really helpful as we build out that action. But I think that's great to include in the plan, especially if it will help us access some funding in the future, especially even as we're including all these other grants from other federal sources and non-federal sources. So yeah, that's definitely an action that we could include in here. And is those resilience hubs, are you imagining it similar to, if you're familiar with how the city of Baltimore operates them? So they, they deal with natural hazards, but it's also like, in partnership with like the health department and social services and all of that. So it's kind of a bunch of different agencies or departments coming together to help.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking about.
All right, perfect. Yeah, we will definitely make sure that is addressed in there. Thank you. All right, so we are just about at time. So this is our last slide. We made it. So this is just a plug for how you can stay involved. I know we've mentioned the survey a bunch of times, but the survey is active. Anyone in the Mitigation Advisory Committee is welcome to take it. You could pass it to your family members, your friends, see if they're interested in taking the survey. So we have the link there, the QR code. It's available on the Hazard Mitigation webpage or on the Office of Homeland Security's webpage. We have the mitigation plan information there as well. The one under number 2, that is those problem areas. So you can kind of drop a pin on a map and tell us where you've seen some hazard issues in the past. Also feel free to shamelessly plug that to your social networks within the county. And then just some reminders that we will be sending out the draft HIRA sections for review. You can provide input on the draft goals and potential objectives that we covered earlier. You can send just like rough ideas or anything. Feel free to email me about that. And then also similarly, if you have, you're struck with inspiration on a mitigation project or action that you would like included, definitely send those my way as well. And ask others. If you hear something, if you think there's someone that we should talk to that might have some ideas within the county or city or any of the jurisdictions, please pass that information along or provide my email or information to them. We definitely want to hear any and all ideas so we can make sure that we're, you know, covering everything that we need to in the plan. But other than that, we are at time. If anybody has any final comments or questions, we're happy to hear about those. But if there's none, then I will wish you all a good afternoon and a good rest of your day. Thank you so much for being involved with this. I know it can be kind of a long meeting, but we really, really appreciate you guys being here. Couldn't do it without you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank
Very
you.
good. Thank you all.
Thank you all.